The day is September 1st, 1985. The local time, 12:48 in the morning. The research vessel Nor sails some 400 nautical miles off the coast of Newfoundland. A series of cameras and sonar equipment is scanning the ocean floor as Dr. Robert Ballard and his team take turns watching the video feed from the surface. Up until now, it's been an endless stream of smooth sand with the occasional sea creature, but suddenly, noticeable debris appears on screen. Then, a massive boiler, and finally, out of the cold darkness, a huge steel wall. After over 73 years, human eyes are once again gazing upon Titanic, and she's been found. While Titanic may have sat alone at the bottom of the ocean for 7 decades until Dr. Ballard's discovery, her long isolation was certainly not due to a lack of interest or trying. Quite the opposite, in fact. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your friend Mike Brady from Oceanliner Designs, and this is the fascinating true story of how the Titanic was discovered. Immediately after the Titanic had sunk, the families of victims and survivors came together to discuss plans to try to locate the wreck. Within only a few months after Titanic had disappeared beneath the waves in 1912, the Guggenheim, Astor and Widener families formed a consortium. They contracted the Merritt and Chapman, Derrick and Wrecking Company to locate and raise the wreck. They'd hoped that by bringing Titanic back to the surface, they could collect the remains of their relatives for a proper burial and retrieve their personal possessions. The plan ultimately went nowhere, as there was no technology at the time to even locate the wreck, never mind raising it. Shortly thereafter, in the spring of 1914, a plan was designed to raise Titanic by either using magnets or balloons, but neither of these plans got beyond the initial stages because they were deemed too expensive. Mere months after this failed proposal, and Europe then found itself entrenched in 4 years of fighting for the First World War, an interest in Titanic and her discovery took a backseat for the collective mindset. Now, it wouldn't be until 40 years later that the first actual attempt to locate the wreck would be underway. In July of 1953, Risdon Beazley Limited, a Southampton-based deep-sea salvage company, chartered the Admiralty coastal salvage vessel Help to carry out an expedition. The plan for finding Titanic's wreck was to set off a series of underwater explosives and then use sonar to record the echo profiles. This, and subsequent missions in 1954, were obviously failures. The next set of serious attempts to locate Titanic were in the early 1980s. Eccentric, self-made billionaire Jack Grimm had already tried to find Noah's Ark, the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, and the Hollow Earth. Then he turned his attention to Titanic. Before the mission had even begun, Grimm had already secured a book deal, a song label, and a documentary to be narrated by famous actor and orator Orson Welles. Now, Grimm would make use of side-scan technology in his search for Titanic. Side-scan technology works by towing a sonar device which emits pulses down to the sea floor. The resulting picture features light and dark areas. Hard objects, like a shipwreck, show up as a dark area. Equipped with this mapping technology, Grimm and his team set out for the North Atlantic on the research vessel HJW Faye. The mission was plagued by bad weather from the start and faulty equipment, and after just 3 weeks, Grimm returned home with no sign of Titanic. He set off once again in 1981 for an expedition that would prove to be much more eventful. Weather once again was a deterring factor, but it was on this trip's last day that a strange shape was spotted on the ocean floor. The object appeared to be a blade from a propeller. Grimm returned home and claimed he'd discovered Titanic, or at least part of it, but scientists accompanying Grimm were at odds with him over this claim. There was no substantial evidence to back up Grimm's testimony. He set out one last time in 1983, but weather once again failed to cooperate and the voyage ended prematurely. In a twist of tragic irony, using what we know of the wreck's location today, it's been determined that the sonar equipment Grimm used in 1980 passed right over the wreck, but failed to detect it. And then the sonar used in the 1981 exhibition came within just 1.5 miles of the ship. Jack Grimm passed away in 1998. Despite all evidence to the contrary, he never backed down from his claim that he had been the first person to discover Titanic. Now, Jack Grimm may have failed to discover Titanic's location, but he came tantalizingly close. With researchers narrowing down on the wreck side, it was a matter of when, not if, Titanic could be found. Enter Dr. Robert Ballard. Accompanied by his team, armed with his own technology and funded in secret by a US Navy expedition, the world was on the verge of the most famous discovery of modern history. Robert Ballard was born in Kansas, but raised in San Diego, California. It was here that he developed his fascination with the ocean. After viewing Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea at 12 years old, Ballard knew he wanted to be a Captain Nemo type and explore the world beneath the sea. Ballard's interest in the sea would carry him through his studies and his career. He attended the University of California in Santa Barbara, earning degrees in chemistry and geology. While a member of the Reserve Officer Training Corps, he entered the Army. 2 years later, he requested transfer to the Navy. Then he was assigned to the Woods Hole Oceanographic Research Institution, where he became a full-time marine scientist with a doctoral degree in marine geology and geophysics. That was around this time when he started to partake in underwater expeditions, when he took submersibles to explore the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a chain of underwater mountains. Now, while Dr. Ballard was always interested in exploring the world beneath the waves, he confesses still that he was never really a Titanic fanatic. However, he did recognize the enormity of potentially finding her, saying that, quote, "Titanic was clearly the big Mount Everest at the time. So many others had tried. Many thought that I would have succeeded or I should have succeeded, but didn't." Several decades after that fateful viewing of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Dr. Ballard and his team turned their attention to the most famous ocean disaster of all time. Ballard first considered a Titanic expedition in 1973, and his first attempt to discover Titanic actually took place in 1977, 3 years before Jack Grimm's initial attempts. Ballard took the deep-sea salvage vessel Sea Probe out to Titanic's last known location in search of the wreck. Essentially, the Sea Probe was a drill ship, and Ballard and his team attached some sonar equipment and cameras to the ship's drilling pipe, but the expedition failed rather unceremoniously when the drilling pipe broke. 5 years later, in 1982, Dr. Ballard approached Deputy Chief of Naval Operations Ronald Thunman of the US Navy in the hopes of funding an expedition to finally locate Titanic. Thunman and the US Navy were not interested in this proposal, but they did have a counter-proposal in mind for Dr. Ballard. Now, the US Navy had lost 2 nuclear submarines in the 1960s, the Thresher and the Scorpion. The cause of their disappearances had been a mystery to the Navy ever since, and they'd hoped that their discovery could at least lead to a theory as to why they'd been sunk. So, they offered to fund Dr. Ballard's mission to Titanic on the condition that if he found the missing submarines, he could then use the rest of the financing and time allotted to look for Titanic. The mission would also have to be top secret. Ballard spent 2 years researching the mission, and then he sent off. In 1984, he discovered both missing submarines, and then in 1985, he finally conducted a second expedition to map the wreck of the Scorpion. With his obligation to the US Navy now complete, he was able to turn his attention fully to Titanic. But by this point, the funds were low, with just enough money on hand to give him 12 days to locate the wreck. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. With time and money running out, Dr. Ballard narrowed his search field down to just 100 miles and set off aboard the research ship Nor. Now, the Nor was owned by the US Navy, but operated by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. The 245-foot vessel was launched in 1968 and delivered to Woods Hole in 1970. She was equipped with a dynamic positioning system capable of maintaining a precise position on the sea surface, along with other sophisticated navigation and communication equipment. Dr. Ballard brought along several other pieces of advanced technology to aid in his search. Angus, or the Acoustically Navigated Geological Underwater Survey, was an imaging sled towed behind by the Nor. It was the first unmanned search and survey system developed by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. It was designed to work primarily in extremely rugged volcanic terrain. Now, one advantageous feature of Angus was that it maintained a continuous visual contact with the sea floor. It was equipped with 3 large-capacity 35mm cameras containing 400 feet of film. Now, this was enough to provide a total of 3,200 photos on a single mission. Now, each camera had different focal length lenses, so that in total, the 3 could work together to photograph a section of sea floor some 200 feet in width. Strobe lights used to illuminate the bottom allowed Angus to be flown higher and see further than conventional deep-sea photographic systems. The sled was highly portable, and photos taken by Angus could be developed on board the Nor using warm seawater for analysis within 4 hours. Now, this quick turnaround time meant that the scientists were able to monitor the survey in progress and modify their track accordingly. Ultimately, Angus was used to film the wreck and was the only vehicle to be used in both the 1985 and 1986 Titanic expeditions. Dr. Ballard and his team also used the ROV, or remotely operated vehicle, Argo in their search for Titanic. Argo was developed and designed in-house by Woods Hole Oceanographic, built largely with commercially available components and specially developed software. The sled consisted of a system of television cameras and sonar equipment. It could acquire wide-angle film and television pictures while flying 50 to 100 feet above the sea floor. It was also capable of zooming in to capture exquisite detail. An array of cameras looked both forward and down, and strobes and incandescent lighting illuminated the ocean floor. Unmanned or tethered systems like Argo can operate 24 hours a day, and Argo was capable of operating at depths around 6,000 meters or 20,000 feet. This meant that around 98% of the ocean floor was in reach. Argo was a run anytime, go anytime system, so it's no surprise that it was the device that finally found Titanic and sent back the very first pictures. Titanic's discovery was, with absolutely no hyperbole or exaggeration, an historic event. Once the news reached the shore, the world was absolutely enthralled. The most famous ocean liner of all time had been found, her final resting place confirmed. Now, more time would be needed to answer many of the Titanic's mysteries and confirm certain theories, but her initial discovery answered perhaps what was the most argued over fact since the sinking. Titanic had indeed split into two sections. After the sinking, the British Wreck Commission held an inquiry from May to July of 1912. Now, the purpose of this inquiry was to establish a detailed account of Titanic's sinking. At this inquiry, several witnesses said they had seen Titanic split in half, while a few others said it didn't. Some said it was too dark and they couldn't see either way. Second Officer Lightoller, the most senior surviving member of the crew, and therefore perhaps the most influential voice at the inquiry, insisted that the ship did not split, saying, quote, "It is utterly untrue. The ship did not and could not have broken in two." Despite several accounts of the ship breaking apart, it was generally believed and accepted for decades that Titanic sank in one piece. Dr. Ballard's discovery had put the debate to rest and validated the testimony of all those that insisted she'd broken apart. The wreck consisted of two main sections, the bow, and separated by about a third of a mile, the stern, and then in between a massive debris field. Now that Titanic's location was confirmed, Dr. Ballard could plan a follow-up visit equipped with technology to allow manned dives down to the wreck. Now, Dr. Ballard revisited the Titanic wreck site again in 1986, this time aboard the ship RV Atlantis II. The vessel was the support ship for Alvin, a submersible designed for deep-sea exploration. The concept for the Alvin had actually begun way back in the 1930s, when Alan Vine, an engineer at Woods Hole Oceanographic, had an idea for deep-sea exploration. He wanted to create a vessel that could withstand the immense pressure found at the bottom of the ocean while also capturing data for research. After 30 years of hard planning, development, and advances of technology, Alvin went from conception to reality and was placed into service by the US Navy on June 5, 1964. The 17-ton submersible allowed for two scientists and one pilot to dive to the depth of 4,500 meters or 14,800 feet for up to 9 hours at a time. Alvin featured modern-day technology for research and for safety, and featured a titanium energy release sphere that could eject and float occupants to safety in the event of an emergency. Alvin's design and technology made it a perfect companion to bring human beings up close and personal with Titanic for the first time in over 7 decades. In the summer of 1986, Alvin made 11 dives down to Titanic, carrying Dr. Ballard and 2 companions. Alvin was also accompanied by a small ROV named Jason Jr. Now, this ROV was built for the Titanic expedition specifically and was attached to Alvin via a 300-foot fiber optic cable and could be stored safely in bespoke housing at the front of the submersible. The ROV was equipped with one video camera and one 35mm film camera with a strobe. Jason Jr. allowed the research team to get closer to Titanic than they ever could with just the Alvin. The ROV first entered the wreck via an open cargo hatch on the bow. This area of the ship was filled with debris, but Jason Jr. was able to move on and enter through the opening of the grand staircase where the domed housing used to be. The long fiber optic tether connected to Alvin and allowed the ROV to descend several decks. Jason Jr. gathered more photos and videos by entering near the ship's officers' quarters, and in all, the team captured hours of video and over 57,000 photographs of the Titanic. Since that fateful September day in 1985, dozens and dozens of manned and unmanned dives to Titanic have been undertaken. Her location is no longer a mystery. The technology to visit her now is readily available. With the ship and her sinking now prominently back in the public conscious, there's no shortage of funding to support these kinds of expeditions. In the 39 years since Dr. Ballard's discovery, many of these expeditions have provided us with clues as to what happened the night of the disaster. Many survivor testimonies have been validated. Titanic serves as a study for deep-sea marine life as well. Scientists can observe the effects of steel the longer it sits on the bottom of the ocean. Most importantly, though, with Titanic's discovery, it's ensured that she will never be forgotten. We'll forever have a glimpse as to what happened that fateful night in April of 1912. To all those that sailed on Titanic, those that were lost, and those that survived, their stories will continue to be told time and time again. Titanic shows us that although some things may be lost, they're never truly gone. And if you look hard enough, you just might be able to bring them back. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your friend Mike Brady from Oceanliner Designs. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because we get new videos out weekly. If you want to support my work and get really cool perks like behind the scenes and early access, please visit my Patreon in the link in the description below, or sign up as a YouTube member. Come and join the crew. As always, stay safe, stay happy, and I'll see you again next time.